For 20 years, the F-35 Lightning II has been the only game in town, the undisputed king of the export stealth market. If you wanted a fifth-generation fighter, you had to ask Washington for permission. But on November 12th, that monopoly died. In the skies above Zhuhai, China didn't just unveil a new jet. They unveiled a direct threat to American air dominance. Yes, at first glance, the J-35A looks like a clone. The silhouette is familiar. The design is undeniably inspired by Lockheed Martin. But if you think this is just another cheap knockoff, you are making a dangerous mistake. This isn't just a plane. It is a signal that Beijing is ready to flood the world with stealth technology. Today on JetCore, we're looking past the shape of the airframe to answer the real question. Does the J-35A actually have the teeth to challenge the F-35? Or is it just a paper tiger wrapped in stolen blueprints? To understand the real threat, you have to look past the shiny paint job we saw this week. You need to go back to 2012, to a humid runway, where a clunky, dark prototype called the FC-31 Gyrfalcon first stumbled into the light. Back then, the FC-31 was the ugly duckling of Chinese aviation. It was built by Shenyang Aircraft Corporation, the other guys. In China, Chengdu Aerospace is the golden child. They built the mighty J-20 Mighty Dragon and got all the government funding. Shenyang. They were left fighting for scraps. They built the FC-31 as a private venture, basically a desperate sales pitch on wings to prove they could still compete. And honestly, it was a mess. When it flew at the 2014 air show, it didn't look like the future. It looked like a liability. It bled energy in tight turns. It wobbled on approach. It was powered by smoky Russian-derived RD-93 engines, the same engines used in the cheap JF-17. Western analysts looked at it, laughed, and called it a cheap toy that would never see combat. Even the Chinese Air Force ignored it for years, refusing to buy a single unit. But Shenyang didn't quit. They took that failure back into the hangar and went dark. For a decade, they iterated. They didn't just polish the airframe, they redesigned it. They trimmed the fat, reshaped the bulkheads, and overhauled the sensors. They took a commercial failure and transformed it into the J-35A, a dedicated carrier-capable Predator. The laugh track is over. This isn't a sales pitch anymore, it's a frontline weapon. Now let's address the copycat screaming match. The internet is convinced this is just a stolen F-35 with a Chinese flag painted on the tail. And look, I get it. The resemblance is uncanny. The high-mounted cockpit, the trapezoidal wings, the diverterless supersonic inlets, DSI. It screams Lockheed Martin. We know Chinese hackers have targeted US defense contractors for years. The J-31 files from the 2000s are practically public knowledge. But calling it a clone is lazy analysis. It ignores the cold, hard reality of physics. Stealth engineering is a trap. It forces you into a very specific box. If you want to deflect X-band radar waves away from the source, there are only so many shapes that work. You need edge alignment. You need saw-toothed panel gaps. You need a blended fuselage to hide internal weapon bays. When two different engineers try to solve the same math problem, how do I fit 2,000-pound bombs inside a supersonic jet without reflecting radar? They are going to arrive at the same answer. Convergent evolution isn't always theft. Sometimes, it's just aerodynamics. Remember, the J-35A is a twin-engine jet. The F-35 is single-engine. That alone changes the entire internal structure, the fuel plumbing, and the stress points. You can steal a shape, but you can't steal the engineering tolerances required to make it fly. This is a custom-built Chinese machine designed to break the US containment chain in the Pacific. Here is where the propaganda machine goes into overdrive. Chinese state media has been pushing a specific terrifying metric, that the J-35A has a radar cross-section smaller than a human palm. If true, that puts it right next to the F-35 and F-22. But before you panic, let's look at what they aren't telling you. Stealth isn't just about the shape of the metal, it's an ecosystem. The invisibility comes from the RAM, radar-absorbent material. This is a complex, chemically finicky coating that eats electromagnetic energy. It is incredibly hard to manufacture and even harder to maintain. On American carrier decks, Maintaining that coating is a nightmare. Salt water eats stealth skin for breakfast. Humidity makes it peel. A scratch the size of a fingernail can make an F-35 light up like a Christmas tree on enemy radar. The U.S. Navy spends thousands of man-hours scraping and repainting jets to keep them invisible. Does China have a RAM formula that can survive 6 months at sea in the South China Sea? We have zero evidence of that. The J-35A looks smooth in the press photos, but if that coating starts to bubble or delaminate after 10 missions, that palm-sized cross-section becomes barn-sized very quickly. Until we see this jet operating in the harsh reality of a carrier deployment, that stealth claim is just marketing. And speaking of carriers, this is the J-35A's true test. This jet wasn't just built for land. It was built for the deck of the Fujian, China's massive new electromagnetic catapult carrier. Landing a stealth fighter on a moving ship is the most violent thing you can do to an airplane. You are slamming 20 tons of delicate electronics onto a steel deck at 150 miles per hour, catching a wire that yanks you to a stop in 2 seconds. The F-35C had to undergo years of structural reinforcement to survive that impact without cracking its stealth coating or snapping its landing gear. The J-35A has beefed up landing gear in the photos, yes. But does it have the structural integrity to do that 500 times without warping the airframe? If the fuselage bends even a millimeter, the stealth seams open up. The radar waves get in. The invisibility breaks. China has never operated a stealth fighter from a carrier before. They are attempting to do in 5 years what took the US Navy 30 years to master. It is an incredibly high-risk gamble. And then, there's the smoke. Did you catch it in the flight footage? As the J-35A hit the throttle, you could see dark, distinct plumes of exhaust trailing behind it. In the world of fifth-generation warfare, smoke is a death sentence. This visual cue gives away the J-35A's biggest secret. Its heart is still weak. For years, this program has been stuck in engine purgatory. It's been forced to fly with interim engines, upgraded WS-13S or Russian RD-93S. These are 1980s technology, wrapped in a 2024 airframe. They run hot, they burn dirty, and they scream, "Here I am," to every infrared sensor in the sky. China knows this is their Achilles heel. They are frantically trying to finish the WS-19, the Holy Grail engine designed specifically for this jet. The WS-19 promises higher thrust, supercruise capability, and, crucially, thermal management to hide that heat signature. But building a high-performance jet engine is the hardest industrial challenge on the planet. It requires single crystal turbine blades that can spin at 15,000 RPM in temperatures hotter than molten lava. Reports suggest China is still struggling with the metallurgy and quality control to build these at scale. Until the WS-19 is reliable, the J-35A is a stealth fighter with a smoking gun on its tail. It might be invisible to radar, but to a heat-seeking missile, it's a torch. But let's assume the engines work. Let's assume the stealth holds up. There's still one invisible hurdle that could ground this fleet: the code. A modern 5th-gen fighter isn't a dogfighter. It's a flying supercomputer. The F-35's superpower isn't its turn rate. It's sensor fusion. It takes data from radar, infrared cameras, and electronic warfare pods, stitches them together into a single 360-degree picture, and shows it to the pilot in their helmet. Writing the software to do that without crashing the computer took Lockheed Martin 15 years and millions of lines of code. It was a disaster of bugs and glitches before they got it right. China is good at hardware, but software, that's a different beast. If the J-35A's radar sees a target, but the computer takes 3 seconds to process it, the pilot is dead. If the electronic warfare pod jams the jet's own communications, the pilot is deaf. We have seen nice touchscreens in the J-35 cockpit photos, but a pretty screen doesn't mean the code behind it works. In the invisible war of algorithms, China is still unproven. But let's zoom out. The Pentagon isn't just worried about the PLA flying this jet. They're terrified of who else might fly it. This is the strategic nightmare the US has been trying to prevent for 30 years. The democratization of stealth. Until now, if you wanted a stealth fighter, you had to be America's best friend. The F-35 is locked behind a wall of diplomacy. Russia's Su-57 is a ghost, barely in production. That left the rest of the world with nothing. China is about to fill that vacuum. Reliable intelligence indicates Pakistan is already at the table. We're hearing rumors of a deal for 36 to 40 aircraft. Think about what that does to the balance of power in South Asia. India has the Rafale, a fantastic 4.5 Gen jet, but it's not stealth. If the Pakistan Air Force gets operational J-35s armed with PL-15 long-range missiles, India's entire air defense grid becomes vulnerable overnight. And it won't stop there. The Middle East, Southeast Asia, Africa, nations that Washington refuses to sell to are looking at the J-35A as their ticket to the elite table. China is positioning this jet as the AK-47 of stealth, advanced enough to be dangerous, affordable enough to buy in bulk. We are looking at a future where 5th-gen tech is a global commodity, not an American privilege. However, before we declare the end of Western air superiority, remember this. There is one thing China cannot steal, clone, or buy. We call it the human software. You can copy an airframe, but you cannot copy 20 years of combat experience. The United States has been flying stealth jets since the F-117 over Baghdad. American pilots have thousands of hours training in the combat cloud, learning how to use the F-35 not just as a sniper, but as a quarterback that directs drones, ships, and satellites. China doesn't have that institutional muscle memory. Do they have pilots who know how to manage a stealth engagement when the data link gets jammed? Do they have maintenance crews who can repair RAM coatings on a pitching deck in a typhoon? Do they have a doctrine that integrates this jet with their ground forces seamlessly? They are building it, yes, but they are building it from scratch. The PLA is learning lessons today that the US Air Force learned in 2005. That experience gap is the only thing keeping the J-35A from being an immediate existential threat. A shiny jet with an inexperienced pilot is just an expensive target. So where does that leave us? The J-35A is a pivot point in history. It proves that the era of uncontested American air superiority is over. China now has 2 distinct stealth fighter programs running simultaneously, something no other nation on Earth, not even Russia, has managed to pull off. But a prototype is not a fleet, and a stealth shape is not a victory. The J-35A still has to prove its engines won't fail, its stealth won't peel, and its pilots can actually fight in it. It is an ambitious leap forward, but until we see it operate at scale, it remains a question mark. The monopoly is dead. The competition has begun, and while the J-35A might not be a perfect F-35 killer yet, it is a warning shot that the West cannot afford to ignore. Watch this space, because the sky is getting a lot more crowded. This is JetCore, and I'll see you in the next one.